Good morning. Morning.
I'm calling the meeting to order with the invocation done by Rotarian Amy.
One moment, please. Let's stop this music.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, good morning.
Hi, good morning, fellow Rotarians and guests. Can we invite a moment of prayer, please? Heavenly Father, we come to you gathered as Rotarians, asking for your guidance as we conduct our weekly meeting. As you guide our thoughts, words, such that everything we discuss, everything we do, truly exemplifies service. So we pray for our fellow Rotarians around the world and keep us safe throughout this holiday weekend. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Amen.
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 Thank you, Rotarian Kimmy.
You're welcome, Madam President.
Loyal toast, past President Leroy.
Good morning, fellow Rotarians and guests.
Good morning.
Let us raise our glasses in a toast to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
To the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Have a great day.
Let us welcome our visitors. Secretary Dornette, please.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Sunrise meeting. It's so good to see all of you. Let me start by welcoming our visiting Rotarians. We have Rotarian Kellyanne Frendo from the Rotary Club of Southeast Nassau. Give us a wave. Nice to have you. President Alicia Lake from the Rotary Club of St. Martin. Welcome, President Alicia. And she's Zoom queen. She's at everybody's meeting, but I know this one is even more special, and later you guys will know why. Also, welcome to past President Valerie Dean, always with us from the Rotary Club of Abaco. Welcome. Could you give a wave? Okay, her picture is up. And also Rotarian Barry Smith is visiting with us this morning. All right, so I think that covers our visiting Rotarians. We have one guest. I'm not seeing him yet, but our guest this morning, Dr. Morris, Dr. Gilbert Morris, welcome to our meeting. And you'll hear more about our guest speaker.
I'm
Oh,
here.
I've seen you.
Hello.
I've seen you. Welcome. Welcome, Dr. Morris. Good to have you. Welcome, Rotarians and friends. Have a great meeting. Enjoy, please.
Thank you, Secretary Dornette. And a special welcome to our visiting President Alicia Lake from all the way from St. Martin, and our guest speaker, Dr. Morris. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
This morning, we are going to highlight our board members who were not available last week. I trust they're with us this morning. Do we have our Public Image Chair, Danny, with us this morning? International Service, Diana Lynn, are you here?
Yes, I am. A pleasant good morning, one and all.
Thank you. Our Vocational Chair, Barrett Miller, Rotarian Barrett Miller. Are you with us? Treasurer Magnus, are you with us this morning? Announcements, please. Do we have any announcements this morning?
I have an announcement. As you know, Rotarians, we're ordering masks so that when we get back to our meetings, we can have our Rotary Club of Nassau Sunrise mask. So far, the orders are coming in great. I have by tomorrow to put in the order so that the mask will be ready by next week, Wednesday. So if you have not yet ordered your mask, remember to answer your email. Let me know whether you want both colors. We have navy and black. And you can either pay at the meeting next week, or you can transfer funds to our bank accounts. And those account numbers were emailed to you one day this week. So I'm looking forward to getting the orders. So far it's going great. Some people have ordered up to 4. So that shows a sense of pride in our club. I'm looking forward to the others. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Dornette. And now we'll have a few words from our new Road to Peace Chairman, Rotarian Patrick. Is Patrick with us this morning?
Good morning.
Morning, good to see you.
Yeah, okay, on Road to Peace, I must say first that it's still a learning process for me. There's still a lot that I have to learn about it. But the gist of it is Road to Peace is basically what they're trying to do is establish peace sites around the country.
Yeah.
Right now, they have 9 peace sites in Eleuthera. They don't have any anywhere else. And their aim is to establish some in New Providence and some in Freeport, and then they're going from there. They have 3 schools that they were in communications with before COVID. And so they look to try to, they're H.O. Nash, T.G. Glover, and CC Sweden, and they're looking to continue that dialogue as soon as time allows. The peace sites doesn't have to be a school. It could be a school, a church, or anywhere, but it doesn't only have to be there. Individuals can establish peace sites at their home. And what it is they have a kit that comes along with it. And in the kit, there's a flag, there's a plaque, and they have some information cards. I haven't gotten an email with all of this stuff, so I can't show it to you as yet. But as soon as I do, I would. There's a cost involved. The flag is $150, and the plaque is $35, and all the other stuff comes along with the kit. So if anybody is interested, they may have a church, or they may even want to do it at their home. It's available to any options that they would prefer, because the aim of it is to be able to spread peace around the world. And so wherever they can establish these peace sites, it's felt that they're gaining progress, and they're getting more people involved.
Excuse me, Rotarian Patrick. If we have a school that we installed a peace garden in, I know maybe our club and certainly maybe other Rotary clubs installed a peace garden in certain schools. GHS comes to mind for our club. Do you think there would be an opportunity to, I guess, have the ability to refresh that peace garden and also turn that into a peace site, or turn the entire school into a peace site? Could be a easy toe in the door.
Most definitely. And they have even had elaborate ceremonies to some of the peace sites where they had the police force, the defense force. They come and they raise the flag and they perform. So it's most definitely they would be more than happy to include that into it. And especially with you already having a peace garden, which means the dialogue has already started. So your foot is in the door. So the transition would be very seamlessly.
Hi, Rotarian Patrick, sorry. Kemi here. Just for clarity, when you say, are you talking about creating safe spaces where persons feel free to dialogue and assemble who feel abused? What exactly is the purpose of the safe space?
Basically, it's more or less awareness more than anything else. It's bringing awareness to different individuals, different groupings, different settings about the road to peace. That's the main focus, because the more people that they can get involved, the more people that aware of it, it brings us that much closer to bringing the whole world into peace.
IPP Sophia had a question. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I don't have a question for Patrick. You asked about announcements, so I don't have a question for Patrick. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
He can go ahead.
Continue, Rotarian Patrick.
Okay, so that's basically the gist of it. As soon as I get more information on it, I will certainly pass it on to the club.
Patrick, can I just make a comment as well, please? We would be interested at BTVI to be one of those centers.
Yes, to tell you the truth, I think they were in dialogue with somebody too.
Yes, we have been talking to them, so we're interested. We'll follow up. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Rotarian Patrick.
Thank you
for that update. And now we'll ask past President Bill introduce our guest speaker.
I just had a quick announcement. I'm sorry, President Francis?
Oh, yes, go ahead then.
Just a reminder to everyone as we assemble next week that we are going to have the award ceremony. So we want persons to come out and support those persons who will be receiving awards from the last administration, and the naming of the Rotarian of the Year for 2019-2020. So that's going to be a big deal. So just inviting everyone to remember to put that on the calendar for next week and show up at the British Colonial Hilton. Thank you.
One question, IPP, Sophia?
Yes.
Will we be drawing the raffle at that time as well?
President Francis, past President Tanya, and PhD Karen Pinder was handling that. So you need to ask one of them, please. I
Good
believe
morning.
they're going to do.
Hi, good morning, President. Yes, we will be doing the in-house raffle at that time. So we're very excited to announce the winner.
Okay, thank you so much for that update.
President,
And now,
since we're on the raffle,
Bill.
I just wanted to say, since we're on the raffle, we have 2 nice raffle prizes this morning. Please, and I enter in the chat whether you want 1 or 2 tickets, and the drawing will be done before the end of the day, and you will see live on video who is the winner. All right, last week Ruben won the raffle prize, which was really good. All right, thank you.
Thank you too. Past President Bill, you may now introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Morris, please. Is past President Bill with us this morning? I would then like to ask Rotary Leon to introduce our guest speaker, please.
Good morning, President Francis. Good morning, all Rotarians in the chat group.
Good morning.
The resume of Dr. Professor Gilbert Morris is so long. When I sent it to President Francis Dean, she said, "This is too long." I said to her, just simply paraphrase it. I think everyone within the chat group and within the Bahamas has heard Dr. Morris.
Yes, we have.
And so I would just say to all, let's put our hands together and welcome Dr. Morris, because I would want to give him as much time as he needs. And I would ask him to self-introduce himself. Thank you kindly, Dr. Morris.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Dr. Morris.
I have to say, it's while COVID is a pestilence, I find myself in exile, as Maurice Clinton tells me, on Paradise Island, in a gilded cage. So I'm here in a hotel by myself, actually, just myself and the security fellow. And I've been here for 6 months writing a book. I give my respects to the president of Rotary and to the visiting guests. Rotary has a special place in my heart because my first public speech was at a Rotary club in Freeport when I was 14 years old. And that has stood me in good stead. And in addition to that, I received, I think, your Rotary scholarship at one point, also during my studies. So Rotary means a great deal to me in this respect. And I see in this club you have Cousin Leon, who was my Sunday school teacher, I don't mind telling you. And the first person in my childhood I heard use the word technology. And I also see you have the beautiful Felix Stubbs, another mentor of mine. And so I know that, that I'm in good company. So the topic that I was given was the post-COVID Bahamas, COVID-19 Bahamas. I'm going to invite you to think about that topic a little bit differently. I will suggest to you that there will be no post-COVID scenario. There will be no post-COVID scenario. On January 20th, when I first spoke of this publicly, I think on Michelle Malcolm's show, and I warned that this will be with us for the rest of our lives. A few days after that, I was commissioned by a business group to prepare an action plan which they wanted to submit to the IDB. That plan was crafted and submitted on February 2nd and submitted to 5 governments of the Caribbean. And one of the points it made was this: COVID will be with us forever. We have to learn to live with it. Why do we know this? The bubonic plague arose in 1347. In 1347, it killed 50% of the known world. In fact, it was so ravenous that it killed nearly 100% of the aristocracy and destroyed the feudal system and led to the first jobs, because the population had dwindled so greatly that peasants were able to bargain for better wages because of the shortage of labor. And so pandemics have this power in that they shift social arrangements fundamentally. And in that report, I made it very clear that the bubonic plague continued to ravage Europe and Asia for 300 years, popping up here and there, outbreaks killing 10, 50,000, until it killed 50 million people. Now you might say, okay, but that's in the past. No, it's not. There were thousands of cases of the bubonic plague in the 20th century. And just last week, there were 2 cases of the bubonic plague in China. And in 2019, there were 5 cases in the United States. That's 670 years later, the bubonic plague is still with us. And so I admonish, when we look at the culture of COVID-19 in the sense of how it spreads and its function, it is the same type of contagion. And so I don't believe there will be a post COVID period. I believe we're going to have to live with COVID-19. Now, having said that, the question is, what do we do about it? In the same action plan that was submitted to the IDB and to the principles of government in the Bahamas, I called for what I express as COVID-free zones. COVID-free zones. And what are they? Well, one of the things that I should preface that by saying, there's a perception that pandemics have to do primarily with medicine. In fact, they don't. Pandemics are about logistics. They are about interstitial demographics. They are about data gathering and data analysis. They are about timed strategies, facilities, capacity, and the coordination of all these things across a social space. Medicine is merely a tool at at the end of which those that you could not capture receive treatment. But when you look at a pandemic, it really is, you need people who are skilled at biostatistics, at logistics, at interstitial demographics, and so on, in order to create a plan. And so, in that respect, the COVID-free zones, or as Shivago Lang told me to call them, COVID trust zones, these zones would be places where we could test everyone and we could begin economic activity sooner rather than later, even while the rest of the country may be shut down. The Bahamas and Turks and Caicos in the Caribbean have the greatest advantage because we are archipelagos. And in an archipelago, you can select small communities like Exuma, Harbor Island, Spanish Wells. There are parts of Grand Bahama, the West End in particular, Paradise Island, Albany. These places lend themselves to quick testing and isolation that could have allowed us to begin COVID-free zones. Because here's what I said. In January 20th, when I participated in Zoom calls for aviation, for the hotel industry, and so on, one of the things that seemed to be prevalent, one of the sentiments that seemed to be prevalent, was that people thought, well, the Americans will get their arms around this and we'll go back to normal in about 3 months. And I warned that no, this would not be the case. We will be dealing with this robustly well into 2021. And the absence of a federal program in the United States, and I don't raise any criticism of any particular criticism here of any particular administration, it's just a factual point. The absence of a federal program means you lack coordination across the entire social space of the various states of the United States. And that means you're not getting data that's aligned, you're not getting aligned policies, and you're not getting aligned policy outcomes within a range of time. And so the predictive capability of the impact of the responses to COVID-19 are like a whack-a-mole all over the United States. And you see it now, as I said on February 2nd, that you have massive outbreaks in the United States at the moment. Texas, Florida, Ohio, these places all have outbreaks equivalent to countries such as Iran and Italy in previous iterations of COVID-19. And in my view, this meant one thing for the Caribbean: no American tourists. And what this has exposed is that our economy was severely one-dimensional because we have lost nearly 85% of national income. And this makes it very, very difficult so that the Bahamas has no monetary response capable of solving this. And the fiscal response are bounded because of the high level of debt and deficit that we have. And so we've had our credit rating essentially reduced to junk bond status. So what is a country to do? My view again is that the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos, or any archipelago, has a great advantage in that we have other islands. And so the thing to have done to respond to COVID-19 and its ravages would have been to coordinate Eleuthera, Exuma, as I said, parts of Grand Bahama, such as West End, Paradise Island, perhaps Rose Island, I don't know what's fully there, Albany, places that can be locked off and you can test everyone. And this calls for a new type of economics because you would have to have the staff in the property. So if you had 1,000 rooms, you wouldn't have access to the 1,000 rooms. You would need about 1/3 of them to be available for staff dwelling and for quarantine, on-site quarantine. And there are issues as to who would pay for that, the quarantine itself. And then the resort would have to pay for staff accommodation, and they would have to test all staff and so on. So this really creates a new economic model. But one of the things that economists always worry about is where's the demand coming from? And I won't say the beautiful thing about COVID, but the strategic thing about COVID is that right now, if you live in Connecticut, where all the hedge funds are largely stationed, or if you live in Virginia, where all the big defense contractors are, all right, or if you live in Texas, where your chip makers are, and so on, and if you're a wealthy person, the one thing you're looking for in the world right now is someplace that you can decamp to. And the Bahamas presents this opportunity in these potential COVID-free zones. And you would take the Turks and Caicos pricing model. Turks and Caicos has the highest ADR, the highest average daily rate in the Caribbean by far. And so, and it has two. At the lower level, where your ordinary hotels is $454 a night, and at the upper level, it's $1,500 a night. And so, at $1,000 a night, you could have yachts, jets, and private charters. Why do I say private charters? I said in that action plan that commercial airlines would not be a solution to the economic shortfalls that we have. You see, again, I emphasize, we don't have a COVID-19 problem in the Bahamas. We have the impact of COVID-19 on our economic model. And that is really the crucial thing to pay attention to. The protocols for dealing with COVID have become fairly standardized. But the issue for us is, even if we are completely compliant and completely COVID-free, we would die and starve, because our economic model requires American tourists. And you see this from the impact on the peg. If we don't have find a way to get US dollars coming in, this country cannot survive. As it stands, it is my studied view that large properties, I'm sorry if you work there, like Atlantis and Bahama and so on, I don't see how they can recover. I don't see it, because even in the most modestly progressive process, if you're traveling from the United States, you have to get a test which is 72 hours in advance. So that's fairly standardized. You have to go through a drive-through, you administer the test yourself, but the test takes a very long time, the results take a long time to come back, and they may come back outside the 72-hour zone, which has happened to a number of people. When they landed in Nassau, they found that their tests, the results came outside of the 72-hour zone. How are you going to process large groups of commercial airlines with people with just that particular problem at the front end? And you can't fill large hotels. You have to engage in this logistics, and you can't fill large hotels. The other risk is, if we have a major breakout, the US will close its border to us. So you're right back in the same situation again, this time with the entire world and your tourist source country having banned travel to you. So we are in this situation requires the most innovative, advanced, data-driven economic model and rollout that we've ever had in our entire history. And so in that plan, I make the statement, very stark statement, that the Bahamas has to proceed as if the US ceased to exist. As if the US ceased to exist. And that means the Bahamas has to turn itself into an attractive place where we have mastered in these micro communities that have, so Exuma has at least, I think with Sandals, 600 rooms, somewhere around there, and then other small hotels in the grouping. Eleuthera has, I understand that Spanish Wells is sold out. It's Airbnbs, and they have the right idea. And so Spanish Wells continues to be our little Singapore in the Bahamas. Very proactive, you know, thinking through things. I hope they have all the various COVID protocols, prevention protocols, and so on. But that really is the model that and they did this beginning in March. And so I think that we could have had these COVID zones in Paradise Island, West End, Grand Bahama, Eleuthera, Exuma, and probably some of the smaller islands that could be reached by ferry service. We could have had this in any micro community where we could test everyone and monitor everyone, and we could have already been on Barbados, for instance. We shared and had Zoom calls. My colleague, Dr. Avanish Prasad, whose father was an economist in Jamaica. He is an economist. He used to be in London, and he's now the senior economic advisor to Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Motley. And one of the things, the variations they made on this concept of the COVID-free zone is to produce a visa called a welcome visa, where an individual can work from Barbados, but not in Barbados. And I know that's a tight bifurcation, but basically, this idea comes from the Turks and Caicos draft immigration ordinance, which I worked on with the former Premier of Turks and Caicos, the Honorable Galma Williams. And in that document, we created various categories of visitor to extend the tourist model. So we didn't want just the visiting tourist who comes to an EP hotel and stays for 4 or 5 days. We wanted someone who stayed for a year. And so in that iteration, Barbados has issued these welcome visas, which has really, really taken off in terms of interest. The only difficulty in the Barbados model, because it is not a high-end model, that means you could have rent inflation in the local setting, pricing people out of their rental, locals out of their rental arrangements. So in order to deal with that, one of the things in the action plan that was prepared for the IDB is we called for $1 million annual stay and a $3 million permanent residency criteria. Turks and Caicos's criteria for permanent residency by investment is 1.5 million. 1.5 million. And there is complete uptake. And there's no difference between Turks and Caicos and the Bahama Islands. They're all part of the Bahama Bank. They have the same beaches and iterations and so on, same people, same peas and rice, macaroni, coleslaw, you know, the diabetes producing diet. So in that, we believe that the high end that Turks and Caicos uses would be amenable for the Bahamas. And if you got a significant number of people coming into the Bahamas in these COVID-free zones to live for 1 year, you could see income of between 150 and $200 million a year, just on that program alone. On the PRC program, it could be close to 1.4, 1.5 billion. So that would completely, in some respects, replace the loss of income. So you're talking about, I think the numbers we ran were for 3,000 people. And the point we were making is that 3,000 people can replace the income of 7 million people. So we have 7 million tourists. The idea was, how do you replace that income and bring the Bahamas even again. And so we believe that these are the only strategies that are available to countries in our condition. Again, we even argued about the language of opening and closing. We don't think, and I certainly don't think, that small communities that have one-dimensional economies that depend on a tourist-sourced country can speak about opening and closing. Because even if as I say, if we're COVID-free and we open, we have no control over airlift, we have no control over the US, and we have no control over their COVID policies. So if we open, what we're doing is people have been spending their savings for 6 months. And if we remove the moratorium on transfers, remove the moratorium on money transfers and these sorts of things, what we're doing is drawing down on the reserves. That is our problem. So every day that we don't have American tourists in any volume, we don't have COVID-free zones, we're not using one of these strategies that's outlined in the proposal to the IDB, what's happening is Bahamians are drawing down, paying credit card bills, drawing down on the reserves, so that's depleted. Our debt is hovering around 100% of GDP. I think our deficit is somewhere in the neighborhood of 700 million. I can't remember whether that's the accurate, that was a figure. And we've lost 85% of income. That cannot continue. And our credit rating has been reduced to junk bond status, which means our borrowing requirements, the interest rates would be very, very high. Now, in my view, and I've spoken to members of the government, and I recommended that we put a team together, and that team goes to Lyford Key and Harbor Island and Spanish Wells and other places, to wealthy Bahamians, and we get each person who is capable to put in $1 million into a fund. So rather than borrowing, it's a grant or a long-term loan or whatever have you, but it's a crisis fund. And that would at least, if we raise $500 million, we could set out a food strategy to ensure that Bahamians have food for the next 6 months. Why is that important? Because if Bahamians become concerned about power, and I dare say the internet, they don't have internet access, you're not going to be able to enforce any sort of curfew. And as Jerome Powell, the head of the U.S. Federal Reserve, the chairman of the U.S. Federal Reserve, said in March, that, which was shocking for a Republican, and he said it though, that the most important thing to maintain social harmony is to ensure that citizens are provided for in their basic needs. A call to arms that tells every citizen, this is what's going to be happening in the next 6 months. There'll be high unemployment, and there is. And so the employment spike you saw in the United States, where 4 million jobs were created, that could have just been Uber drivers and packing boys and taxi drivers returning to work. That is not a solid or a predictive economic indicator at all, not at all. And we already know that in those states that the COVID-19 infections have spiked and the deaths have spiked. So this will cause the population to retreat, and we believe the Bahamas could avoid this really speaking to the population and ensuring that to say to Bahamian people, there will be power, medical care, there will be internet. Spend that 6 months retooling for COVID-free zones in order to attract visitors to the Bahamas. One of the things that I think is very, very important is, and I'll make this as a final statement, then you can ask questions if you like. the pent-up demand in the United States is not merely to escape COVID. Remember that winter is coming, and all the predictive models have said that there'll be worse spikes than today in the winter. And so if you have a private jet, it means that we can require you to do things to that private jet that we can't require of a commercial airline. If you have a yacht, we can require you to do things of that yacht we can't ask of commercial airlines. If you have private luxury charters like the old junkets we used to have in Freeport with Sir Freddie Laker and people like that, we can require those luxury charters to do things we cannot demand of commercial airlines. And last week, 16 flights in the United States had to return to their destination or land in emergency because people wanted to fight stewardesses because they didn't want to wear masks. You saw in Antigua, people landed and now wanted to sue Antigua because of the tests that they had to do on the ground. So again, I say that the attempting to return to normal is a mistake. Pandemics in the history of the world never allowed, you can go straight through from the Justinian plague in, I think, 435 AD, all the way to 1347, to the outbreaks in places like Mongolia and Italy during the medieval period, and you come right down to the Spanish flu, to the 20th century H1N1, Ebola, West Nile virus, all these sorts of things. In all of these pandemics, and I studied every single one of them, I mean, long before, and one of the things that we have to manage is the economic fallout. And the economic fallout requires us to think well ahead and to do things which not only stave off the infections and the deaths and any sort of irresponsible behavior with respect to exposure to a contagion, it requires us at the same time to retool our economic model. And I have to say, everybody who knows me knows I'm not political. I have no interest in political parties whatsoever. And I speak to any government or any Bahamian or any Caribbean who wants to speak. And I must say that I think I'm going to say this is a strong statement. I think Dr. Minnis and Dr. Sands and those who were, Dr. Forbes and those who were responsible for approaching this, they have taken certain approaches that were the correct ones, right? So I think the communication with the public has been relatively good. We haven't tested widely, so the truth of the matter is we haven't really contained the virus because we don't know who has the virus. And we're talking about opening, but what we need to be able to open is not testing. And this is another important point which I wanted to make here finally. It's not testing, all right? Testing only matters when you're in front of the outbreaks. So Taiwan, South Korea, Senegal, wonderfully, Iceland, Singapore, when you're out in front, testing works because the contagion is coming, a few people have come in, you test them, you isolate them, and the rest of the population, you practice social distancing and mask wearing. Once the contagion has gotten into your country, the secret is not testing because the contagion is exponential. You can only test so many people at one time. And if you think about the comparison with the flu is 3 to 5 people infected, as I understand it. The COVID-19 is 2 to 3 people, except for the asymptomatics. And the asymptomatics can be 1 to 50 or 1 to 150. And that's the danger. It's exponential. It spreads like wildfire. So while you're testing, your system is being overwhelmed, and then your facilities become overwhelmed, and then you become Italy or some states in the United States at the moment. And so it's very, very important to understand that at this stage, it is more important to put resources into detection of potential outbreaks. And that is something we failed utterly to do. So, and detection requires Bluetooth contact tracing and e-diagnostic surveys. So that means a person lands here, they have a test from the United States that may show a negative test, but they land here, they get sick. They need to be able to go on to a system, an e-diagnostic survey, and put in their symptoms. And that goes to a central database. Immediately you send your team there and the Bluetooth contact tracing begins. And that's the fastest you can respond to this kind of exponential contagion. And if we were able to do that, the country would become a machine of COVID-19 detection. I'm afraid we are going to have to be in that mode forever, for good. We're going to have to be in that mode. So that's something that we've done nothing about. And we don't have an e-diagnostic survey, and we don't have Bluetooth contact tracing at the level that we need to have to be strategic. And we don't have COVID-free zones, with the exception of Spanish Wells that have done it on their own. But it needs to be at enterprise level with the imprimatur of the Bahamas government. And if we're able to achieve those things, we would really have a new economic model. It would have to be fully decentralized. It would be data driven, and we've got a demand cycle that we can tap into, because aside from COVID-19, and aside from people who fear that the violence that will come in the November elections in the United States is violence that they would like to escape. In addition to all of that, remember there's the underlying demographic shift in the United States, where 100 million people are retiring in the next 35 years. And those 17% of those people are moving south. And we believe that if we got 1% of those to move to the Bahamas, we would have the largest economic expansion in our history. If you got 3,000 people to move to the Bahamas at $3 million each, that's $9 billion, all right? Almost total Bahamian GDP. And it is not outrageous to suggest that we could now entice 3,000 Americans to move to the Bahamas with a permanent residency or a passport that costs $3 million, twice what Turks and Caicos is charging, because the demand drivers are so powerful at the moment that people simply want to get out of the United States into a safe zone where they can protect their families and live out their lives in the luxury to which they had become accustomed. And so I leave it there, and I welcome any questions or comments that you have. Thank you.
Francis, you're muted.
You have to unmute yourself, President.
Yes? Any questions at all?
You can post them in the chat if you're shy.
I have a
President
question.
Francis, you need to unmute your mic.
Yeah, I did. I have a question. What do you think the impact would be on our educational system?
That's a good question. You see this discussion going on in the United States right now, and I think they're about to make a very huge mistake, because while children at the front end of COVID-19 were least likely to be infected, now there's a new strain, it seems, which really impacts children quite severely. And if you look at Japan, which has had the best, I mean, schools in Taiwan are open, schools in South Korea are open, schools in Japan are open. But if you look at what Japan did, Japan set up these fumigation gates where each child comes in the morning, they are sanitized, they have the sanitizing spray, and they put their hands in, their hands are clean, their entire backpack, everything is sanitized, and they go into sanitized classroom with UV lights that can kill viruses and so on. So Japan has turned the country in their schools into a COVID fighting machine. We haven't done that. The reason the first thing you have to do in a crisis is gather resources. You can't fight the crisis by just responding to its impacts one by one. You must gather resources. So if we had gathered the resources and then applied them, I think we'd have a better chance. So I'll give you an example. I wrote a paper on a secondary paper on education. And I know that we were trying to get people online and all that kind of thing. I think it's futile. Too late. Should have been done 6 months, 9 months ago. It's too late. And I know that Leon Williams will tell us that the platform is there, that the platform can be used. The problem is the people, not the platform. There's no doubt that the platform is available, right? But the question is whether or not people will use it. So we had reports, and people have called me, I'm sure people have called some of you, to say that their child is on the platform, but the teacher hasn't shown up. So we have no way of monitoring from the central government, from the Ministry of Education, whether the teachers are participating in the platform. So what I recommended was, I made a curricula of films, documentaries, beginning with the origins of the universe, right? With photosynthesis, how life came to exist, the creation story, the geology and geography of the Bahamas, of the Caribbean, the function of the oceans and all that sort of thing, and right down to Bahamian history, Caribbean history, world history, the history of money, all right, all these sorts of things, the history of tourism, all in great documentaries. So almost 70 documentaries. And I recommended to the Ministry of Education that they commandeer a channel on ZNS and Cable Bahamas and run these documentaries with students having to watch for 2 or 3 hours every day. And I think at the time in the lockdown, entire families would have participated, all right? They would have participated. And so the Methodist Church in Turks and Caicos followed this program. So every day you would actually change the mindset of young Bahamians and families if you ran these documentaries. And then at the end of it, we proposed that we have, so we recommended it begin at the beginning of April and run until the end of July. And if we had done that in August, you would have essay competitions based on the documentaries. And of these essay competitions, we recommended 10 $10,000 first prizes, 10 $7,000 second prizes, 10 third place, $5,000 prizes and so on, which we thought would be great incentives, right? Kind of a stimulus package, if you like, based on education. And if we had done that, in terms of education, we'd be in a completely different place right now. But we didn't do that. And I did a special package, which was with the Nobel Prize Foundation and National Geographic, which has a complete elementary school education formula for elementary school children. And my daughters in 6 and 7 in the United States, they're doing this program. My wife has a preschool, and they have 400 children on this program. They haven't left home in 6 months, but they're doing this program, and they know something about Alpha Centauri, and they know something about whether Pluto is really a planet, and they know something about photosynthesis, and they understand the origins of the universe, things that they don't normally get in school, but are relevant to their conception of their place in the world. And so I think that we've missed these low-tech, broad-scale opportunities to do things which could have really driven our education system in another direction. And people say, I don't think there was any point in trying to do the GCSEs or the BJCs at this point, because if you were a failing student in December, this term isn't going to make a real difference and especially when you've been at home for 6 months. And I think we could have come up with a different formula. Now, people may disagree with that. That's fine. That's fine. But I do think that we should have been more proactive. And I don't think trying to yes.
We have one more question, and then we'll move forward. Thank you.
All right.
PhD Karen, please ask your question.
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Morris. Thank you so much for your time and your insight. It's been very interesting. One comment and question I have is, I definitely appreciate your idea in terms of replacing the income from the 7 million tourists with the permanent resident idea. But how does that translate into employment? Because definitely the 7 million tourists would provide employment for a lot more persons than replacing that with residents. Could you just provide some comments?
Yes.
Just very briefly, please. Very briefly. Thank you.
One of the elements of that was that people who come to retire on PRCs, they're not working. They just spend money. They need the same things that tourists need. They need groceries, they need cars, they need petrol, they need power, they need all these sorts of things, right? And so there was an opportunity for that. Secondly, you could build out a medical service where their retirement communities come with medical services built in. And so Professor Peter Blair, the Bahamian professor, economics professor at Harvard, has something called occupational licensing. So you have like nurse practitioners, dialysis technicians, nutritionists, physiologists, exercise specialists, and so on. All these things would be new job categories to service that group that would be very, very important. And we just have, the second thing is we have to move to universal basic income, which if you had those 3,000 people at $3 million and $9 billion, you could enact a universal basic income where you pay the average Bahamian $1,800 a month, as they did in Norway and Finland just recently.
Thank you. We'll now ask President-elect Therese to give the vote of thanks, please.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Rotary Club of Nassau, I would like to thank you for your very wonderful presentation this morning. I believe I can speak for us all when I say that we were enlightened by your presentation this morning regarding the new normal post-COVID-19. Once again, I'd like to thank you for your time this morning and your knowledge that you impacted on us. We would like to appreciate you and you come again.
Is what you want to check? Okay, I'm just gonna get the other one that I've filled up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, President-elect Therese. And now we'll have the four-way test by Rotarian Tonya.
Good morning, all. The four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. We're reminded to ask ourselves, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? Have a good day.
Thank you. The final toast by Treasurer Magnell, please.
Good morning. Final toast is Rotary around the world.
Rotary around the world. Thank you all for your presence this morning, and I want to thank especially our guest speaker, Professor Morris. Thank you so much for coming, and we certainly enjoyed your presentation this morning.
Thank you very much.
I wish we had more time. Thank you so much, and have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you.
Happy Independence.
Happy Independence to all.
Happy Independence Day. Yes, yes.